Hey everybody, this is Brian Yellow and Origin Stories on Creativity number 13. I had the opportunity to speak with J.M. Debord. He is an expert on Swiss psychiatrist and psychoanalyst Carl Jung. He has written a book on dream interpretation. He calls it a dictionary on symbol, signs, and meaning. All that information, of course, is going to be in the show notes, as well as his Facebook page, his website, Twitter, all that good stuff. Highly recommend checking it out. This gentleman is a moderator on Reddit. He does the subreddit for Jung. He does a subreddit on dreams. He's quite active. He has a lot of information. This conversation, as all my conversations do, went in some surprising directions. Check me out, brianyellow.com, and follow me on Twitter at BRYAIELLO. And here we go, J.M. Debord. You have said that you would take Jung as your godfather. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
yeah, yeah. And by the way, my name is Jason Debord. I'm an author, and we'll go over more of that later. But I'll tell you how I got involved with Jung because that's what your
Please do.
audience wants to know about.
Absolutely.
Uh,
That's what I
so,
want to know about.
okay, awesome. About 25 years ago, I was a college student at the University of Cincinnati,
Okay.
and I was a few years into my studies. I hit a wall. I needed help, and I went to see the school counselors and stuff, and they were like, "Oh, you just need to be better involved, like with your time and a little more structured. You're kind of scattered, you'll be
Hmm.
fine." But it didn't really resonate with me emotionally. And I went to see a counselor after a friend of mine gave me a printed chapter from a book that he was writing, that this counselor was writing, who was a local guy in Cincinnati.
This
And
is
I
Ohio,
read
right?
it. Yes, Cincinnati, Ohio. And I was absolutely amazed by what this man, his name is Larry Pesavento, and what he had to say about the process of becoming yourself, a person, what Jung would call individuation. Now, Larry was writing from his own perspective, but he kept referring to this guy called Carl Jung. And I'd run across Jung in some of my psychology classes, but we never really went into any sort of depth. He was always just sort of lumped together with Sigmund Freud as one of
Right.
the
Yep.
so yeah, as one of those luminaries, early guys in the field of dream psychology. And I started there and started exploring Jung. And I
Now,
found
is
right.
Freud a dream guy? I always thought he was kind of the mom guy.
Yeah. Well, that's
That's
how,
how I took him anyway.
Freud's interpretation of dreams was the first book that really caught the popular imagination on this subject. It
Oh,
was
really?
right around the turn of the 20th century when he published it, and it took a few years for it to catch on. And the first major psychiatrist who caught on the Freud's work was Carl Jung, and they ended up having this remarkable relationship with each other. And
I know they had a
they split
bromance.
later. Yeah, a little bit of a bromance going on here, which, like many bromances, it ended kind of suddenly and acrimoniously. Um, but all this leads back to Jung as my spiritual godfather. Is
Hmm.
I found in Jung's writing somebody who put into words things that I knew in my heart, I knew in my intuition. He approached the idea of spiritual development of the person, but from a psychological perspective. And he really stripped out a lot of the religious ideas. But if you really go far with Jung, you'll find that he's going a different path that's leading you to the same place. You can go
Hmm.
into a monastery and you can have the quiet life of contemplation and inner development and prayer and stuff like that, or you can go kind of a Jung's roots where he found a different way. It's more of engaging actively with your life, of engaging with your inner person, your inner being. Jung calls it the archetype of the self, and self is
Okay.
capitalized.
Uh-huh.
And what it is you have this blueprint for the development of yourself as a person to become a whole and complete and fully integrated person. And it is a blueprint, an archetype that is deep inside of the psyche. And if you access that part of yourself and you have a relationship, then you can also develop that side of yourself, that spiritual, engaged, loving, caring, giving side of yourself. And it can also lead you towards sort of the mystic's path of deep insight and appreciation of life. So I found that by stripping away some of that language of that was sort of the religious dogma, which had turned me off to Christianity early in my life. I really
Hmm.
engaged with it as a teenager, but then I got turned off later because of all of the dogma and, you must do this and you must do that to find God. And I was like,
Totally
wait a minute,
understand.
there's a different way of doing this. You don't even, in fact, with Jung, he kind of strips out God and he says, look, there is you and you develop you as a person and then you will find God. But let's take God out of the equation because that gets into way too many ideas and beliefs and stuff that, it can really turn your mind into a big trap, if you
Hmm.
get caught up in all of this stuff. But instead, let's just make this simple and talk about the development of the human being to reach towards individuation, the sort of self-actualization. If you remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs, at the very peak of the pyramid is self-actualization, and that's really what Jung is talking about too, is reaching this point inside of yourself where you are fully integrated, your conscious side, your unconscious side, all of the different areas, aspects of your psyche, including your persona and your ego.
Know
So that is
thyself.
the Yes, know thyself.
Know thyself.
So that's the trip that I've been on, and I fully explored Jung's writings and concepts and teachings, and I later decided that I was going to start giving back by helping out over at the Jung forum at reddit.com, which if your listeners have ever used Reddit, they know it's a massive social media site. It's based off of people submitting content and then voting it up or down. The top posts and comments and stuff will be the ones that you see first. Over at the Jung forum, it's a small community, but these are all people who are enthusiastic about Jung and his teachings, and they want to know more about him, about
Hmm.
his contemporaries, because of course Jung spawned an entire he was the tree, but then there were all these branches that came off of him that went off into all of these directions, from chaos theory, personality
Yeah, I
types.
definitely want to
uh,
touch on some of the quantum mechanics, chaos, string theory elements of his that spawned from his philosophies.
Absolutely. And I happen to have studied this recently. I ran across something that was his Jung's interactions with physicist Wolfgang Pauli, and they developed ideas about archetypes and how the mind can interface with the quantum fabric of the universe. And
Ooh, give me
oh, it really
shivers.
got into good stuff. And I want to make sure I mention this. If you use your favorite search engine, actually, if you use Google for this, I know for sure it'll be the top result. Put in quantum Jung, and the top result will take you to this article that combines together all of these ideas about quantum physics together with what Jung said. And then it mentions all this interaction between Jung and Pauli. Pauli was originally a patient of Jung's, and very quickly, they developed, instead of being a doctor patient relationship, they developed as two peers who wanted to hash out these really incredible ideas that they had and develop like the theories behind the way that consciousness interacts with the quantum fabric of the universe. So, yeah, man, we can dig it or anything like that. I'm just somebody who has studied Jung for a long
No, I love
time.
it. But let's get back into the self-actualization paradigm a little bit and talk about the worship of the self and the exploration aspects of it. Because I think that opens up kind of the elements of fiction, discovering the character, looking into the creativeness of writing and things of that nature. I mean, you have to know your characters, you have to know things of that nature. Can you maybe explore a little bit of how Jung wanted his patients to explore themselves?
Sure. Well, the first thing is he said that you want to know and accept everything that you find about yourself, and that you really need to begin with the sort of thorny parts of yourself, the
Yeah.
dark side of yourself. He
What
said
did
that
I
if
hear recently? There was something I just recently heard about knowing the most evil parts of yourself.
Well, maybe not so much evil, but dark.
Dark.
And by dark, I mean shadow. And by shadow, what I mean is the parts of yourself that are unconscious, but otherwise could be conscious. Now, the unconscious
Yeah.
mind is about 95 to 99% of the mind is unconscious.
Hmm.
And so that means that it's outside of your conscious control and awareness. And your job is to dig into is that as much as you can and make it conscious, which means looking at your shadow side. These are all the things about yourself that are unknown, that are unwanted, that are repressed.
Hmm.
Uh, and we tend to have parts of ourselves that split off as we develop because we are told for some reason that it's not welcome in this the conscious part of the world. Let me just give a quick example so that your
Sure.
listeners have a good idea of this. Now, let's say that you are a young man, you know, your father, you are kind of a gentle soul, and your father is a Marine drill sergeant, and he's going to drill into you that there are these ideas about manhood that you have to live up to. Well, all of those other parts of yourself that doesn't fit into that picture that your father paints for you are going to feel like they're unwelcome. And
Yeah.
if you are like most people, you are going to want to live up to your father's expectations, and you are going to repress and deny everything about yourself that's not living up to the Marine drill sergeant sort of image. Now, the same idea works on the other side for influence from your mother, from your teachers, from your principals, from your siblings and friends, and all this. Everything that's input to you from society, there are going to be things that are very much about yourself that are accepted and wanted, and then there are going to be things that are going to seem like they are unwanted and not accepted, and those things are going to go into the shadow side of yourself. It means they could be conscious, but they're not. So now they're on the shadow side of the ego, and it can work from behind the scenes. And depending upon your relationship with that side of yourself, it can go from anything from unrealized potential at one end of the scale to something that is actively working against you from the back of your mind, from the
Interesting.
shadow unconscious side of your mind. This is the first thing that has to be dealt with because shadow can be a trickster. Shadow is a
Mm.
saboteur. Shadow ultimately is trying to prod you into fully realizing yourself as a person and accessing everything that you are inside and integrating it into your conscious personality. But it does it in a way that is very challenging. It's like the Dark Knight that stands on the bridge and says, "You will not get to the castle and rescue the princess until you deal with me." You
Yeah.
know, and that part of you can be as, you know, it can't be dealt with anger. It can't be forced into submission. You know, it has to be dealt with on a personal human level. It has to be embraced and accepted and loved. Now, you mentioned literature, and I know you're a writer. I am too.
Hmm.
I write some fiction. And one of the early books that I ran across that really affected me deeply was the Wizard of Earthsea series by Ursula Le
Oh, okay.
Guin. And
I'm
in this
familiar.
book, he is a young wizard who's in a school. He's extremely talented, except he doesn't want to do things the way that his instructors are telling him. He's always pushing the boundaries. He ends up unleashing magic that he can't control, and he opens up a rift that allows this shadowy being to come into existence in his world. And then the rest of the book, and then the other two books, are him trying to track this thing down and deal with it. And in the end, the way that he deals with it is by fully embracing and accepting it and reintegrating it back into himself. This is sort of how it works is we begin life in this undifferentiated state where everything is whole and complete within us. And then we hit that crazy period that's known as adolescence. It can happen before then, it can happen late in adolescence, but there comes this period when we try adopting in personality, and inevitably we end up losing parts of ourselves along the way. And if you have an antagonistic relationship with yourself, sort of like that boy who grows up with his Marine drill sergeant father, and not to pick on Marine drill sergeants out there or anything, I just
You
want
can
to
pick on
get
Marines. I was in the Army. It's fun.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and you know how it is. You know, they cut off all your hair and they say, "You're a soldier now, boy." And anything that was gentle and giving and loving about yourself is supposed to be repressed into the background so that you
Yep.
can be a soldier. This process goes on with various levels of, you know, like it doesn't just the Marine sergeant is a very simplistic example, but it tells how the parts of ourselves can get lost along the way. And what Jung is saying is that you want to reintegrate those parts back into your adult personality. You get split off as you get into adolescence or late childhood. And then what you can spend the rest of your adult life doing is reintegrating those parts of yourself that were lost. And those parts of yourself that were lost are said to be in shadow. So Jung calls it the individuation process. And that the reintegration of all those lost parts of yourself back into a whole and complete person. So that's why Jung really resonates with me is if you study spiritual traditions and follow spiritual traditions, you will find that many of them are they're talking about the same process, but they're using different language. And I really liked Jung because he put it into the language of the mind and of the psyche. He put it into the language of medicine. You know, he put it into the language of science. And what I found was is that language is what resonated with me, and that is why he is my spiritual godfather.
So interesting. What did you end up getting your degree in?
I have a degree in political science. I have
Okay.
basically a minor in journalism. And my at my university at the time, they had a journalism certificate program, and I kind of created my own path through college. I needed something to be a major that I could complete and get that Bachelor of Arts. So I studied government and politics, and I really had a passion for it when I was younger. But really, journalism was my thing. And
Yeah,
if
politics will
they would
rot your soul,
Boy,
huh?
yeah, man.
Yeah.
And I, especially these days, and I tend to just stay out of those conversations as much as I can. But
Right.
journalism was really my idea was political journalism. That was in my early 20s. What I had this idea in mind of what I would end up doing. And I thank God that I found Jung and I found my mentor, Larry Pesavento, because otherwise I might have gone down that path and ended up in a place that wouldn't have been as fulfilling as this path, which is I'm an author and I write
Yeah.
about dreams. My new book, The Dream Interpretation Dictionary, is hitting in early June. And I weave in Jung's ideas and concepts and methods into this without necessarily, and I credit him for sure, but I am not a Jungian in the sense of that is my only approach to dreams or that is my only approach to the development of the psyche. But as a
Yeah.
production of my book, far and away, Jung was my biggest influence. And if you read my book, then you will find a lot of Jung's teachings integrated into the book. But what I do is I put it in the language of sort of the everyday person, because that's where a lot of people get lost with Jung, is he uses a lot of these concepts and ideas that you have to really delve into. And you can understand them intuitively if they are in a language that you can really understand. Jung was doing a lot of his writing for academic audiences and people who have,
Yeah. People like
advanced
himself, people that
degrees,
were in psychology, people that were doing work in the brain.
That's right.
I wanted to leave the dreams as our dessert so we can get into that your more
Sure.
personal work and things that you're putting out yourself. So maybe we can delve into the more how could we do this? I want to examine the Jungian. How has Jung been interpreted in the more modern sense of the word? Let's say, yeah, seems like
Okay.
you have a
Well,
grasp of my
yeah, I sure did.
meandering.
No, I jumped all over that
Yeah,
because
right.
I found that Jung is behind a lot of our modern concepts in psychology, such as personality theory. And he's not really credited as being the early pioneer. Of course, way that other psychologists could pick up and run with it. And so if you ever take the Myers-Briggs test, that the whole idea behind personality theory goes back to Jung, and his writings went off in so many different directions that he's actually the foundation of many areas of academic thought. But people, unless they dig really deep into it, they won't realize that Jung is really the godfather behind all of that. Chaos theory,
Oh
he can't
yeah.
be attributed solely to Jung, but there are a lot of, if you read through the writings of the chaos theorists, then you will find that ultimately they lead back to Jung and his writings. And then Jung also delved into things such as mysticism and alchemy, and that the ways, their methods of the mystic and the methods of the alchemist can actually be explained in modern scientific language. It's just that people can't bridge the gap between those two worlds. So
That's
Jung is,
fascinating, actually, because I would imagine you've already brought up a piece of fantasy literature, so I'm going to assume that you like that branch of literature, right?
that is, yes, that captured my imagination as a teenager. I
So
started with
let's
Tolkien
open that
and,
box a little bit and
sure.
examine Jung's influence on fantasy.
Well, this is one that I don't know how much depth I can speak to about it. But there is one thing that we can go into is that Jung
Sure.
talks about exploring everything that is in the mind and realizing that the characters that appear in your dreams and in your visions and in
Oh
your
yeah.
imagination, that these are all aspects of yourself. So
Hmm.
as an author, your dream
Yeah.
characters are inevitably, at least in part, going to be based on parts of yourself. And many of them are going to be highly personal, and they're going to be projected out from your deep psyche. Now, as you delve deeper and deeper into the psyche, you get into this place that's called the collective unconscious. And the collective unconscious it is a sort of a database of all human experience, memory, and knowledge stretching back to the beginning of our species. And many of
Species.
these,
Oh, it's so
yes,
fascinating.
and
I've
many of
actually the
these,
lizard brain is what we're talking about, right?
well, it goes even deeper than that. What it is there is a sort of a collective repository of the human experience, and it is the deepest lessons of this are usually expressed through myth and legend. If you dig into the writings of Joseph Campbell, he talks about, like, his book A Hero with a Thousand Faces, and of course he wrote many others. But when we dig into these characters from myth and legend, what we're actually digging into are characters, archetypes from the collective unconscious that are part of all of us. They can take different faces and different forms depending upon the individual. But if you strip away the layers, what you come to is a base layer that is common to all of us. This is what an archetype is.
Hmm.
So let's just say, like that movie's come out with King Arthur,
Yes.
the Knights of the Round Table, if you read, especially if you go back and you read the original story, it is very archetypal. What they're really talking about is the process of developing your inner kingdom that is populated by kings and queens and knights that are good and knights that are bad, and there's quests for the Holy Grail and all this. All of that is put into a language of myth that is really about the quest to find yourself and become a whole and complete person, to develop the side of you that is like a king, in the sense that it is a leader, it has a vision for your life, it can set forces into motion that will help you to fight those battles and win those wars and develop the intellect and the insight. So if you have the Knights of the Round Table, those are your inner warriors. They are under control of the king, and the king says, go forth and protect my kingdom. If you talk about your inner magician, you're talking about your Merlin, and what you're talking about is your ability to use technology to develop high levels of skill, to have insight. These are all parts of yourself, but they're draped in these other characters. Everybody has a wizard or a magician within them. Your modern public relations specialist, your modern geneticist who is tinkering with the building blocks of life, your modern computer animation expert. These are all people who are tapping into their inner wizard, whether they know it or not. It's
Yeah, it's
just that
brilliant.
myth and legend puts it into a way of approaching it and understanding it that is that is couched in this language. But what we're really talking about is something that is universal to the human experience, and it is there in the collective unconscious, which is this shared depository of experience, memory, and knowledge. So your dream characters, making this all come full circle, when you dig into literature and when you are an author, what you're often doing is tapping into this layer of the collective unconscious through your own mind. Think of it as the mass internet, and you are the individual terminal. Your mind is that terminal. Most of the time, it's accessing information that is stored locally. But sometimes, and for some people, they live their lives connected to the larger internet where they can access all of the other terminals, and not just the ones that are on right now. Follow my analogy here. Those are all the other people, living beings that are alive right now. The other terminals or computers that are out there, the brains that are active as part of this network, it goes all the way back to the origins of our species, and even before then, before we became Homo sapiens sapien. The all of the experience of the human species, from its very beginning, perhaps even going back to when we first emerged from the oceans and before then, all of this is somewhere in there. And Jung said if you keep stripping away the layers of the unconscious, that you will eventually go back to the first thing that opened its eyes and looked around at this planet and went, whoa, dude. I like putting it into language that the young kids these days can understand.
Yeah. Maybe even beyond that. Maybe the fabric of the universe. And
Absolutely. I think it extends even further. We are all part of a conscious universe. If you read the writings of people like Dean Radin, who is the chief science at the Institute for Noetic Sciences, then you and many others, but Dean just comes to mind right away because he wrote a book called The Conscious Universe. And he basically said that the universe is responsive to us as conscious beings, and that the universe itself and everything in it is conscious, but it's different types of consciousness. There is a planetary consciousness, there is a galactic consciousness, there's consciousness in your pets and your animals. It's not the same exactly as human. It's like a spectrum, and the human consciousness is in that spectrum. And we tend to look at ourselves as being solely as the only intelligent beings out there on this planet. And really what we're failing to realize is that we are living inside of this entire conscious universe, that everything is
well,
conscious.
that's the disease of consciousness, isn't it? This idea that we're special.
Well,
Nobody else feels like us.
yeah, well, it's the hubris of
Yeah,
the
the
human
hubris is a better
condition.
term for it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Or the condition of consciousness, because you got to expand it beyond just the human condition.
It's the human condition. We tend to have to put limits on ourselves, because if we knew what our true potential was, then it would really blow our minds. Because I, like Edgar Casey, the famous psychic, I think that ultimately that we are being taught to be co-creators with God, and that all of us have this potential to create our own universes. Now, I think that that begins with, like an author, you can create an entire world inside of yourself. If you read someone like a Tolkien, Middle Earth was not just words on a page. Middle Earth was a place that was alive inside of himself. He created an entire world that he could then be the god of that world to determine what was going to happen. And I think that you can look at yourself as a human being as creating your own world. It is your own inner world, and that you can be the creator of that. And that we eventually as souls can develop to the point where not only are you creating an inner world of consciousness, you can also create outer worlds. You can use your consciousness at least to affect this collective world, this collective reality that we have. But I think ultimately that we can get to the point when we are in the next life, or the life after that, or whatever, that we will reach a point where we can become creators ourselves. So I think that we limit ourselves, that and that there's a reason why we do that, because otherwise, along with all the other stresses of just trying to be a human in this world and make your way in this world, that if you realized what your full potential was, it would blow your freaking mind. It's circuit overload. The circuits fry, smoke come out your ears, your eyes roll back in your head. You're gone because you can't handle the fact that you
Or
are
the reverse. I mean, the unfortunate thing about it is we're so stuck inside the machine that is the bacteria in our guts, our lungs, our eyes, our hands. We're so limited to this spacesuit that we wear on this spaceship that we ride on that we really don't know what exactly we are. We're born, we're raised, we die, and basically we just ride this ride until we don't ride it anymore.
Well, and it's I sympathize with people who can't see beyond just the body as being their existence and the brain as being their existence,
All
because
else is
one, this
imagination,
is
though,
what we're
right?
taught, you know? Yeah, and you know, Jung said that there is no, he taught something called active imagination technique, and you know, there really is, the imagination uses the same areas of the brain as your dreams do. And
It's
you know how
interesting.
powerful dreams can be. Your imagination is really where it all begins. In fact, Einstein said that imagination is more important than raw intelligence.
That's how he discovered most of his theories. He would sit there and imagine. He would just close
That's
his
right.
eyes and just imagine.
He did
I
these
love it.
brain exercises, and it actually started with a dream. And you know, Jung was a famous dream psychologist, and Einstein had a dream about sledding, and he was going faster and faster until he was approaching the speed of light. And he started noticing things that were happening with the stars and stuff like that. He noticed that time was slowing down as he got closer to the speed of light, that time was coming to the point of stopping. And he used these as the basis of his ideas about relativity and special relativity. It all began with a dream, but then he took it and put it into his imagination and kind of ran through these different simulations, plugging in these different variables and tweaking it. And that's how he came up with relativity. So it all really began with his imagination. It
His
wasn't his
imagination.
tremendous intellect, which obviously he had a tremendous intellect and training as a physicist, but really it was his ability to be able to imagine and conceive things that led to his tremendous insights, which changed physics as we know it. I want to mention real quick for the
Sure.
people out
Mention
there,
whatever you need.
there is a book I ran across this. It's called 100 Authors Against Einstein. Now, what people don't often know these days is that when Einstein proposed his theories, it was more than a century ago now, it was not accepted into the mainstream of scientific
He's a
thought
bit
at
of
the
a
time.
pariah, wasn't he?
He was. And until his theories could be proven, there were a lot of people who were trying to disprove it because it really blew the existing paradigm out of the water. His ideas about relativity and, you know, space time, these were revolutionary. And, but the thing was, is that he had the math behind it. And there were a few people that started catching on and reading his stuff and going, I think this guy's onto something. So he didn't get his Nobel Prize until years later. And in fact, his theories could not be verified until they were able to monitor an eclipse and see how light was bending as it was coming off of. They were able to look at the eclipse through, you know, the modern optical equipment of the time, and they were able to prove one of his predictions correctly. And you know that in science, that being able to make a prediction and have it be verified is one of the things that can take a theory from just a concept or an idea to an accepted fact, to a known in science. So Einstein's was, he had a lot of people at the time, some of the biggest academic names, biggest scientific names of his time. They all wrote a book called 100 Authors Against Einstein, and they basically had a big pile on and said, Einstein is wrong, we are right, and that's end of discussion. You know, and well,
Yeah.
guess who was right? And Einstein, being the very clever man that he was, he turned around and said, you know, when he was asked about this, he said, well, I don't know why it takes 100 authors, because if only one of them is correct, then they've proved me wrong. It doesn't take 100, you know. And he was making a point, which is that these people are sticking their head in the sand, and they don't want to look beyond their own little world, their own little box. And this brings the conversation roundabout again, is that many of us are in that box. We don't want
Yeah.
to accept that there is this larger world out there, this larger universe, that it is this wonderful, loving place of infinite consciousness, that we are that infinite consciousness squeezed down into these little bodies, into these, and people,
You know what really amazes me is that, we're so separated, but at the same time, Einstein, who died, 60 years ago, is connected to this man in England who's trapped in this chair, who challenges his viewpoints on relativity. And that challenge is trapped in this thing, millions of light years away, in this hole in the middle of our galaxy that
that's right.
challenges that viewpoint. I mean, it's like,
in Hawking, Stephen Hawking's
yes.
talks about in his teachings about black holes. A lot of that
Yes, and it challenges relativity, and it's like, that's wrong because of this, and they're bumping heads, and it's just amazing. It's like humanity is millions of light years away in an argument that will probably never prove right or wrong.
Their ideas are more complementary than what they've hashed it out. Initially, but Hawking's idea was that their information had to be able to escape from a black hole. Einstein was the first person to propose the existence of a black hole in his theories. He said that there have to be these black holes. If relativity is correct, then there have to be black holes. And of course, it was something that hadn't been observed at the time. Black holes were strictly theoretical until we had the ability to be able to stare into the heart of these galaxies and see these supermassive voids that's sucking in everything around it. And now we even have like Hubble pictures of black holes, absorbing stars around them and stuff. But yeah,
who knows? I mean, who Hawking is going to influence? Just amazing. Who the next one's going to be?
Yeah, and they are out there. I'm trying.
And it is all. I mean, to get back to the subject at hand, it is based on things that Carl Jung or Freud or Isaac Newton has suggested,
and Otto Lowy and Wolfgang Pauli, and there is and his name's Masum. I'm trying to remember his last name. He has come up with some, he's a physicist. He's come up with some theories that have united the quantum with the macro. This is where we've had these problems in physics. And I'm not a physicist, but I follow the concepts. You have one set of rules that seem to apply to the quantum world. And then you have another set of rules that apply to anything that is above that. And so, or I don't want to say above in the physical sense, but just sort of in the development sense. It all starts off with these, super tiny particles, and that at the quantum world, and then those quantum, those form into what makes up our atoms, the electrons and protons and stuff like that. And then the atoms come together, and eventually we're forming cells, and cells form molecules, and molecules form people. And, and all of these building blocks, they build up on top of each other. So you can observe things about, say, like solar systems and planets and black holes. And, then you start getting into gravity and electromagnetic force and, the strong and weak nuclear forces and stuff like that. But then you take the rules that apply there and you try to apply them to the quantum world, and they don't. And there's a guy, his name is Masum, and I'm going to do a quick search here for him as we're talking. And Masum said that there is a way of unifying the quantum and the macro worlds. And if you go to holofractal.reddit.com, this is an awesome place for this. Okay, his I'm gonna try to pronounce it's Masum Haramein, Haramein, and holofractal, or it's the holofractographic unified field theory is what he calls it.
Tongue tire.
It's amazing, and it is built on Einstein. But you go from Einstein and you see Jung on the other side of it. Jung was just approaching the same ideas from a different perspective. We have a universe within us, and the same rules that we apply to understand the physical properties of the universe can also be applied to understand the psychological universe within you. They're just using different language, but it's all really the same. We find that the rules that are affecting atoms are the same rules that are affecting galaxies. You know, it's all just scaled up. It's sort of like a hologram, and that in any piece of a hologram, of a holographic film, you can find a blueprint for the entire picture. You can take a little slice out of that hologram and you can see the entire picture at a lower resolution. And that's really what we're doing here. So I suggest to anybody out there who's
Universes within
interested in this,
universes within universes.
yeah, that's right. And
Yeah.
the atom is a universe unto itself,
Yeah.
you know, and the
Well,
same,
I've actually I listen to Joe Rogan all the time. He's a fantastic podcaster.
yeah, yeah, he really is.
It's amazing. I mean, he doesn't seem like, the biggest brain in the world, but man, he could get into some concepts with his guests. And they were talking about the macro, the tiniest things being universes into themselves. And it gets confusing because I don't think they can actually break down into this gigantic thing that we call a universe somehow. I'm not exactly sure though.
Well,
Unfortunately,
the atom is just a lower resolution version of the entire universe.
somehow it doesn't
But it
work out
has
that
the
way though.
entire blueprint or fabric of it in it. We just haven't figured out the mechanisms for how it all connects together. If you
So
look
yeah,
at
I
it
guess
as
that's the problem.
yeah, you look at it as a spectrum of being, there's 100 different steps to go from an atom to, or if the particles that make up the atoms, to go all the way up to a universal scale. And we have pieces of that picture, but we don't have the entire one yet. But there are people out there, such as Masum Haramein, and then there's another guy I ran across. His name is Dan Winter. And Dan is an electrical engineer by training. He's gone into all the physics and stuff. And he's also, according to him, he has lived in a state of Kundalini bliss for the last 30 or so years. He
What does that
studied.
mean?
What it means is that he unleashed his Kundalini energy, which is a state of being where the energy rises up from it connects your hips where the energy originates, and it goes up to the crown of the head, and the entire system becomes supercharged. And you start living you're living among all of us, but you are in another plane of existence. You are fully connected in with the universal mind, and you are able to shape and manipulate energy. When you do energy work and energy healing, and when you have insights through meditation and even through psychedelics and stuff like that, what you're really doing is you're activating the Kundalini energy, and you're bringing it up through what's called the chakra system. The chakras are 7 energy centers that are associated with the endocrine system. We have these 7 endocrine glands. So like the third eye chakra is actually connected to the pineal gland. And it's the gland itself is not the chakra. The chakras are energy centers, and you can't dissect the brain and get in there and find the chakra, the third eye chakra. But the third eye is a way of visualizing what this chakra does for you.
I mean, if you talk to a neurologist,
higher
the
insight.
pineal is just where the brain processes melatonin. That's what they say.
Secretes melatonin. It also secretes DMT, which is also known as the spirit molecule. And DMT is one of the
I got really
substances
curious
that leads
about
to
that
higher
DMT thing.
experiences. I have not experienced it as a psychedelic drug. Ayahuasca.
Neither have I,
and other
but I
things
could
like
not
this
find any resources to say that DMT comes out of the pineal.
It's one of the places that it's secreted from. If you look up DMT, the spirit molecule, begin there, and that will start your journey down this road. Now, some of what the original theory has been either discredited or it's unproven, but I feel confident saying that DMT is at least in part secreted from the pineal gland, and that the experiences of mystic oneness with the universe, of the Kundalini energy rising up the spine and getting up through the top of the head and connecting you consciously into the larger conscious system of the universe, that this is all connected in together, and that DMT is part of it. If you
What do you think?
DMT, you will have an incredibly
but like quickly though, right? It's like it only
experience
lasts for like a few seconds and it's done. or like
or
a few minutes.
up to a couple minutes, but you
A
go
couple
into
minutes.
you go into a place where time space is not this, it doesn't operate under the same rules
So
as
like
ours. It
physically,
is
you're
not.
going through a couple minutes, but like inside it lasts for
It could be hours
whatever.
or days. Yeah. And you have an experience where time and space, really the linear conception of time space is no longer applying. You are in a different world with different beings, and you're basically, you are accessing the building blocks of our world, where it's kind of the archetypal layer. It's the building blocks of consciousness. And when you get in there, they are very foreign. They are like fairies. They are like things that you see in myth and legend. They are these other beings, and they have their own independent intelligence of you, and
Yeah.
you interact with them. And it is, for many people, I would not, and I'm not endorsing this, because I think that you have to have some preparation for an experience like this. And if you are not prepared for it, then you will never come back. You will blow your little mind, and you will not be able to
Yeah,
come. You
that's
have
the
to
problem
prepare.
that I have with it right there, is that my little mind might not be prepared for it. My thing is, you have the existence that you have right now, and eventually it is going to end, right? And you have to be
Well,
so
as a
careful.
in
You
a
have to
body,
be
yeah.
so, yeah, exactly. You have to be so careful with what you do on this existence, because it is so fragile, right? I mean, my children are, my children count on me, right, to
Yeah.
help them continue their existence, and eventually their children will count on them to continue their existence. And if I screw up, if I don't eat right, if I don't exercise, if I don't teach them how to eat right, if I, skydive, if I race a motorcycle, if I fight the dickhead on the street because he cut me off, I limit their ability to live right. Correct? If I take DMT and I fuck my mind up, then I'm going to limit their ability to live right, which is going to limit their children's ability to live right. So
But there
regardless
are
of
other
what,
ways of getting to the same place, though. You
you
don't
know what
have
I
to
mean
take
though,
DMT to do it.
if I limit my ability to live right now, then I hurt them, even if it opens up this fabric of potentiality.
Well, and
So it's a
yeah, that's where the danger lies, is that you lose touch with reality. And that's our mental institutions are full of people who have touched this world, and they were not able to reconcile that mystical, beautiful world that they touched on in their mind with the everyday reality that they face when they walk out and the truck rolls by and blows the black smog into their face, or they catch their
which is
child,
my point.
dancing on a
Eventually,
ledge or whatever.
I'm going to taste the opposite side of that fabric eventually anyway.
It's waiting
There's
for
not,
you,
it's waiting for me,
existence is
right?
yeah, existence is eternal, and there's a reason why we enter into these bodies, into this
And
physical reality.
I have to keep pushing through this viscous membrane of a life until I can get as far as I can and keep doing as much as I can for whatever I'm leaving behind.
Well, for
It's
most people,
hard.
life is enough, and there's enough of their daily life just to be able to deal with, just to handle coping with physical reality, and making your way in, and paying your mortgage, and your insurance payments, and holding down your
I mean, that
job, and
stuff's
raising your
small though. I
family, and
mean,
stuff
think
like that.
about like
But
that
it's
stuff. What
important.
about this conversation me and you're having right now? That's not your insurance payment or your house payment. I guess it led you to this, right? I mean, you weren't, if you hadn't have paid your house payment and your insurance payment, I guess you would not have been able to have this conversation, which,
Yeah, that's
the
right.
5 people that'll probably watch this video on YouTube, and if I ever get my feet up on iTunes, the 5 people that'll listen to it there,
Well,
maybe we'll.
and those will be the 5 people that were meant to listen to it. And
Yeah, exactly.
it's why I take all opportunities to do this, because we are letting people know that there is this other way of seeing the world and reality and existence and consciousness, that Carl Jung was one of the pioneers of it, that there are contemporaries of Jung who have taken what he gave us, and they've put it into more contemporary language that the modern person can understand and grab hold of. And that there is a promise that if you go down this path, that you will be able to reconcile the two sides, that you can live firmly grounded in reality on Mother Earth, but you can also have your mind mind connected into the higher reality. You can connect in with the spirit and with, higher insight and stuff like that. And you can limit what you have of it when you need to. There are people who say, okay, I'm going to go to a place like, say, Monroe Institute in Virginia, and I'm going to spend a week in deep meditation using the
Ooh.
technology that they've developed there that can help your brain to, it's called hemisync, and they can help your brain to sync up and achieve different states of consciousness by, altering your brain waves through meditation and through yoga and using technology and all this stuff. And then you come back to your everyday reality and you pick up with your mortgage payment and your job and your family and stuff like
All
that.
right,
You
let me ask you a
actually have a
question.
foot in both worlds.
Jason Debord has been given absolute power over our education system. What does he do?
Well, the first thing that I would do is I would teach kids to calm their minds. I don't want
How
to
do you
use
do that?
meditate. Well, it's through deep breathing, deep, slow breathing, and allowing your thoughts to drift through your mind without attaching to any of them. They are just sort of like clouds going across the sky, and you observe them and they're all good. Some of the clouds are a little darker, some of them are a little whiter and fluffier, but they are all just thoughts that are drifting through your mind, and you allow yourself to observe them without judgment. This is being found to work with children who have been having trouble sitting in class and trouble, like concentrating and behaving themselves. Instead of like sticking them in a principal's office or,
Hmm.
punishing them, you make them sit quietly and just use the basic tools of meditation, which includes deep breathing and very simple exercises like this. This is where I would start. Is we need to teach these children that there are ways for them to be able to manage themselves in this environment, without becoming too, without having to drug them up, without
Oh yeah.
having to control them, without having to mold them. Instead of molding them, let's let them, give them an environment where they are safe, where they are loved, and where they are given every opportunity to explore their creativity, to explore their intellect, to explore their feelings, to explore their social relations with each other, to encourage that and foster that environment. And then we will have them turn into amazing human beings. Not that they aren't amazing already, but I think that our education system has become so fucked up that we are pumping out children who have to be drugged into submission because they are being put into an environment that is intolerable. And
Yes.
especially for children who have more curiosity and they have more imagination, the kids who don't fit into the box are really being distorted and harmed by what we're doing to them, not just with the, starting them on Ritalin when they're 5 years old and stuff like this, but just the system that says, okay, if you can't conform, we are going to escalate to higher and higher forms of punishment. And if
Prison.
we will make you, yeah, and that's where it
Yeah,
ends
that's
up,
where they're going
we
every
have
time.
created a pipeline from elementary school, from
Yes, we
kindergarten,
have. Yes, we have.
right to the prison bars. And a lot of these kids, before they've even graduated from high school, are graduating to prison or some
Graduating from
type
high
of
school,
a
they graduate from middle
chemical
school
prison.
going into some kind of juvenile hall. I mean, they're basically just matriculating into prison from seventh grade.
There's a
It's
lot that we could
horrible.
learn from Jung that would help us with this, because Jung's emphasis was on helping the individual to discover everything that is within themselves. And he didn't say, he didn't create like a curriculum for
Mhm.
grades, K through 6 or whatever. Like there
Yeah.
isn't anything in his writings, but you can start with what his basic ideas were and his concepts and go, okay, you are this human being having this incredible experience. How do we help every human being have that experience? And how do we respect them as a person to be able to
Yeah.
grow
I
and
think that's a
develop as
great
best?
point.
So
Respect
that's where I
your
would come from.
humanity.
That's where I would
Respect
come from.
yourself. That's really beautiful. So let's get into some dessert.
Sure.
Let's talk about some dreams.
Yeah, man, let's do it.
You've written a book about dream interpretation.
Yeah, it's called the Dream Interpretation Dictionary, Symbols, Signs, and Meanings. And it's scheduled for release on June 13th. It is currently available for pre-order on Amazon. My publisher, Visible Ink Press, is getting it distributed to bookstores and stuff. They're getting ready for the big launch. It's real easy to get things to Amazon, but then it takes more time to get it to other distribution outlets.
Hmm.
So yeah, and it's a complete it's a dream dictionary, but I wanted to turn that idea on its ear and fill in the what is missing from most dream dictionaries, which is they don't explain the process of dream interpretation. That's why we
Hmm.
called it the Dream Interpretation Dictionary, is because it weaves in my teachings and Carl Jung's teachings about how to interpret dreams and how to understand the environment in which dreams are given to you, which is your psyche. Your psyche is this collective of different parts of yourself, your ego, your persona, your unconscious mind, and all these other parts of yourself all come together into this collective. And what you're seeing usually in your dreams is how all these different parts of you interact. So once you understand the psyche and you understand how dreams work, then you can start to interpret them, and you get into the symbolism that dreams use to tell these stories. Dreams really are stories. They are narratives. This was something that Jung emphasized is that you can engage with the dream at a story level, and you don't necessarily need to get really deep into the quote unquote analysis of it.
Hmm.
What you're really doing is imagine that you have just watched a really cool movie and you've watched it with a friend, and then you go out for coffee afterwards and you talk about the movie. You're going to talk about the plot, the actions that happened in the story. You're going to talk about the characters and the settings where the story takes place. You're going to talk about how the director did and the costumes and everything else. These ideas are translatable over to dreams because dreams are really stories, and they start off with the settings that the story is told within. They have the characters that populate the stories, the symbols that are put in as part of the story to tell the story without having to hit the viewer directly with it. It's the things that are between the lines, the words that aren't spoken in the dialogue, and
I
the
love that you're
words that
saying all this. It's like I love having dreams for that exact same reason. Living the moments of like, oh, this is so cool, and I wake up thinking, oh, that would make the best story in the entire world. I can't remember a thing that just happened.
Oh man, well, pay more attention to your dreams. Keep a notebook by your
Dream
side
journal,
and
right? Oh,
continue.
I
Yes,
can't
a
do it.
dream
I'm so
journal that's
lazy.
there. And I have a newsletter. It's called We Love Dreams. And if you put in We Love Dreams newsletter into a search engine and sign up for my list, you will get
Hmm.
a welcome email that will lead you to resources, and then you will get follow-up emails. I just set this all up where it's an automated system that sends you these emails. You don't have to read them if you don't want to. If you don't like it, you can unsubscribe. I will not bombard you with ads or spam. I will not share your email address, any of that stuff. My goal is to lead you to the resources that can help you to remember, interpret your dreams, and then to live them in the very realist sense. My first book is called Dreams 123: Remember, Interpret, and Live Your Dreams. And it was published by Hampton Roads back in late 2013. It's a guide, it's a beginner's guide to dream work, but it kind of stealthily weaves in some of these more advanced teachings. But it really begins with you have to remember your dreams. If you don't remember your dreams, then you can't interpret them. And most people
Mm.
have trouble remembering their dreams. But here's the rub: once you make it a daily practice or habit, it becomes a focus, and it's something that you want to do, and you make the time to do it, especially when you first wake up. You want to remember your dreams and write down, what you remember of them. Now you can really start getting into, almost everyone finds that they start having more recall of their dreams, and they pull enough out of their dream world to be able to look at it in their waking world and go, well, what was that all about? That's where I pick up and I go, look, you can interpret your dreams by understanding them as stories and engage with it at a story level. You begin with, hey, I had that dream again where I was back in school, and, I hadn't graduated, and, I walk in and there's an exam to take, and I haven't been there all semester, and now I'm all worried about it. And you begin with the idea of what are you learning in your life and what are you unprepared for? What do you feel like you're unprepared for? school is just used as a setting to tell the story of this, that you are encountering something in your life, in your work, in your relationships, in your creative endeavors. There's something that you aren't ready for, and you need more learning to fill it in. And I don't mean learning necessarily from a teacher or from a book. You're always learning about life. There are always skills that you're trying to develop to help you to live your life better, especially as a professional, to be more,
Hmm.
to better manage your time, and to think more incisively, and to gain better insights and all this kind of stuff. So this is all being told to you through a story about walking back into school and going, wait, there's an exam today. Hey, where's my pants? Hey, why? So that's what's being told to you through the dream. If you are running from a big scary monster in a dream, you look at it as a story, engage with it on a story level, and you go, well, what am I really running from? What am I avoiding in my life? Is it a person? Is it a thing? Is it something like, am I having financial troubles and I don't want to deal with it? Is it because I have a relationship that's in trouble? Or is it something like, hey, I really wanted to be a writer, but now I am working in advertising, and this part of me when I was younger that I really wanted to do this, that part of me is not satisfied with my work in advertising. But hey, I'm a busy adult with a mortgage payment and kids, and I've got to be able to pay the bills somehow. How do I
Hmm.
reconcile two sides of myself? If there's a part of you that really wants to somehow fulfill that desire to be a writer, then it is going to follow you, and your relationship with that part of yourself is going to be projected onto the thing following you. If it is something that scares you, then it's going to be shown to you in a scary form, such as a
Hmm.
monster or a
Totally
big
makes sense.
shadow, or a man looking in, or woman looking in your windows and looking at you very intensely. I just helped somebody at Reddit the other day with a dream about seeing this part of this man sitting in a car, and he's sitting outside of his house, and he knows the man is there, and the dreamer is trying to go about his life ignoring the man, but he knows that the man is there. And
Hmm.
every time he looks out the window, the man is looking directly at him, and he's got this really intense look on his face. And the guy's going, man, is there, some explanation for why I'm having this dream? And I said, what if it's your conscience? What if that man
Oh.
personifies your conscience? What you see in your dream characters are often personified aspects of yourself. So when you look at something, in a dream, and it's looking back at you, the question to ask is, what am I seeing about myself projected onto this dream character? You begin there with that assumption. Now, in one of the dream that the guy had, he said it was a recurring theme. And in one of the dreams he recently had, the man got into a monster truck and drove through the wall of his front, like of his house. Like, I'm here,
Right.
So I look at that on a story level and I say, dude, what won't be ignored anymore?
Right.
What are
Beating
you
down your
trying to ignore?
door.
It is. It's beating down
Yeah.
your door, but it's coming from within you. Your door inside of you is the
Yeah. Everything.
thing that you close out, the
Yeah.
things that you don't want to know about yourself, the thoughts you don't want to acknowledge, the feelings you don't want to feel. That is when you slam the door against
You
something
can't
in a
hide from
dream, or you
yourself.
lock the door, but ultimately you can't hide from yourself. That's right.
Yeah.
So you engage with the story, your dream stories, you engage with it on a story level. You can get into techniques of dream analysis that will help to enlighten you to this. But Brian, I want to give you and your audience a key insight here that's going to help them to
Cool.
understand their dreams and approach them. You already know what your dreams mean.
Yeah.
you
Absolutely.
you created the dream somewhere in your mind, and
And
you
myself.
already
Yep.
know what they mean. You invented the story, but it's coming from a side of your mind. It's coming from the unconscious side of your mind, which by definition means that it's coming from outside of your conscious awareness. So your dreams seem very foreign. They seem detached from reality. They can seem like they are being beamed into your head from the mothership out there in outer space. But really what's happening is that you're being given glimpses of yourself. You're being shown yourself and your life in story form, and it's being given to you from this other side of your mind. So you already know what your dreams mean. So what that means is that you approach the process of interpretation this way. Remember what you already know. You already know what the dream means. You just need to remember it. That is a different process than analyzing something. People get lost in dream analysis. You can explore this subject into the Jungs and the Freuds and, James Hillmans and Anne Faraday's and Edgar Casey's. These are all people who were famous for being able to interpret dreams.
Well, let
Almost
me ask you this. When you fall asleep at night, let's say I sleep at 9 and I wake up at 3 in the morning. Like that's when I pop out of bed. That's when I start writing. How much of that 6 hour period of time is actually dreaming?
If you're talking about REM stage dreaming, when the most vivid and intense dreams happen, it's roughly a quarter.
A
Now,
quarter.
as you go through, yes, you go through it's called the sleep cycle, and you go through stages of sleep in a cycle, and it starts off with sleep onset and light sleep, and then deeper sleep. Then you have this sort of dead sleep, which is just sort of blankness, complete deep rest. And then you have REM stage, which is the rapid eye movement. And it's when you have the most intense and vivid dreaming. REM stage sleep can last for about a quarter of the time that you are, or take up about a quarter of your sleep time. It depends on how long you sleep, though, and how deeply exhausted you are when you go to bed. You might, if you have napped all day and then you go to bed at night because, well, I got to go to sleep, you might stay in the lighter stages of sleep and not dream as much. Or you dream, but it is just imagery, it is not meaningful. When the imagery
Hmm.
together into stories and narratives, that is when your dreams get to be more meaningful. You
So the
can
more exhausted I am and the more time I've given myself to sleep, the more meaningful my subconscious is going to give me dreams.
Wait, well, yes, because you can get into the deeper stages of sleep more quickly because you're exhausted and you go right from, sleep onset and you skip right through the light sleep and you get into the deep
Huh.
stages. Now, early on in sleep, your sleep cycles will focus on the deep recuperative restorative sleep, and it focuses on what the body needs.
Uh-huh.
The body is going to need at least maybe 4 hours to recuperate, and your body is running all of these processes. There are things such as cell division, and the cells are renewing themselves. They're allowing toxins and waste out of the cells, and it goes through the bloodstream and it's secreted from the body, most of it through breathing. But then it's also pulling in nutrients. Now, this process is going on all the time, but it's supercharged as you're sleeping. You also have going on in your brain is opening up and becoming more plastic. It's called neuroplasticity. And by plastic, I don't mean like, the stuff that wraps around your,
It's a
the
bad thing,
food
isn't it? Is it
supply or
more
something like that.
rigidity?
Right. It's
Rigidity?
comparison. What plastic actually means, neuroplastic means, is that it means that your brain warms up and allows the neural pathways to be modified, either by making new pathways, by strengthening existing pathways, or by trimming off ones that are no longer needed. So what's going on early in your sleep cycle is your brain is it's opening up and saying, I'm going to integrate all of the new experiences I've had during the day, while I'm also simultaneously running processes that are going to help my body to recover and be able to take on the next day. So there's a bodily process going on, and then there's a neurological process going on. It all kind of rolls up into the same ball of wax, but what's happening, your brain is basically taking time to be able to do what it needs to do. It's cleaning house on
That's
a mental
fascinating.
level, an emotional level, and on a physical level. Then in the second half, if you continue sleeping and you get past that initial 4 hours, the second half of your sleep tends to emphasize the REM stage. Your REM stages grow longer. This has been shown in studies in sleep labs. Your initial REM stages tend to be short, maybe 5 or 10 minutes. Your last REM stages can last for a half hour, 45 minutes. They've been measured as long as an hour. So if you have a 90-minute, see, this is happening in roughly 90-minute cycles, and you go from light sleep to deeper sleep to really deep sleep to REM sleep and then back to light sleep, and you've just completed a cycle. It takes roughly 90 minutes. Now, as you get these 90-minute cycles piled on top of each other, and you've done what the body needs to do, and the emotional and the other, the physical and neurological processes, sort of the nuts and bolts. Now we can get into the more like big life issues that are going on. Now we can get into what do you need to know, like, and develop as a person. And that tends to be the second half of the night. And
Interesting.
that's
That's your
when REM stages get
personality.
really, yes,
That's your
and
personality growing
that's
time.
your REM stages grow longer and longer the more continuous sleep that you have. And by continuous, I mean without being awake for too long in between. You know, you don't want to fully awaken. You can get up and use the bathroom, jot down some notes or from your dreams or something like that. But if you get up fully awakened, then go back to sleep, you're kind of starting to process over, and you know, it kind of depends. There's a lot of variability to it. The point is that you want to be able to sleep long enough to allow this process to run all the way through it, and that the longer you're asleep, the more that you're going to have REM stage sleep. The more that you have REM stage, the more that you're going to have those very intense, vivid dreams that have those deeply significant messages to them.
So this might be a ridiculous question. You dream for 90 minutes, actual time.
Well, you go through a sleep cycle for 90 minutes, and you can dream in REM stage for up to 60 minutes of that.
So maybe how much time is it that you're actually dreaming of? Do you know what I mean? The question is, it might be 60 minutes, but I'm actually dreaming about a whole scene, but my alarm clock is going off during that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. And the alarm clock gets incorporated into your dream as the sound of an ambulance or something like that, you know? And so you're, you know, and your dreams can incorporate physical stimuli into them. It's now when I say up to 60 minutes of a 90-minute cycle, I'm going by averages here, and 60 minutes is the longest that I've ever heard of a REM stage being measured. You could only be in REM stage for, say, 5 minutes, but your perception of time is different in a dream. I know people who have had they dream in a night, and they wake up in the morning feeling like they've lived an entire life, that they went from birth through childhood and teenage and early
So
adulthood
fascinating.
and having family and a career and all this, and they live an entire life. And to them, the way that it feels to them of how much time passed, it feels like they've just lived an entire life. And it's because while you're dreaming, the simulator that is your dreaming mind can make you believe whatever it wants to. The rational, logical, linear side of your mind is muted into the background, and it allows the right brain to come forward and take over the show and fully participate in these dream stories. So what happens is that you lose that linear conception of time, and you're told that something has happened in the dream, like and you swallow it and say, okay, well, that's what happened. You know, like, well, in the dream, it's now a week later. And you think of it as like if you're reading a book, you know, and you end the one chapter and you pick up with the next chapter, and it says, well, now we pick up with the character, except for it's a week later or a month later or a year later. And if you're immersed in the story, if you've suspended your disbelief, another concept from literature, then you're going to follow along with the story, and you're not going to miss a beat.
It makes me think of that glitch from the Matrix. It's like, have you ever visited that subreddit?
Yes, I'm there quite a bit.
There's the top post of that it's basically dead now. I don't think anybody really posts any legitimate stories, but the top post ever on that subreddit is a guy who basically had a head injury and had that exact same experience where he had a family. You know, his wife gave birth to twins. He saw them being born. He raised them up to a certain age, and he's looking at a lamp, and the lamp looks a little bit wrong, and he wakes up in the hospital, and it all turns out to be a dream.
Yeah, and that really tells you something. I just heard on Wendy Garrett's show. Wendy Garrett has a podcast, and oh, he's a psychic. It was a recent show. He wasn't really a psychic before he had this incredible experience where he started being able to predict what was going to happen, whether it was in the next moment or the next week or whatever. But it kept happening to him over and over again. And he lived in Austin, Texas, and he said he felt like he was walking down the streets of Austin, but it felt like he might as well have been an astronaut walking on the moon, because he was totally disconnected from everyday reality, yet at the same time he was very intimately connected in with it. It culminated with an experience where he said that
Culminated as it ended and it never happened again?
well, I should say peaked. It
Okay.
culminated with an experience where he had a near death experience. He was hit by a car on the streets of Austin. And he said that he left his body and that his mind expanded like a balloon. That first it encompassed the scene around him as he's seeing himself laying on the ground with this car nearby. And he's just been hit in the head by the bumper of that car. And he's laying there unconscious. And then he sees that scene, and then it expands, and he's viewing the scene from above, and he's seeing the entire city of Austin, then the entire city of, or state of Texas, then the entire United States, then the entire globe, and it keeps going. Now he's seeing the earth from a distance, he's seeing the solar system, he's seeing the galaxy, it's expanding, he's seeing the entire universe, he's seeing all of the universes that make up the infinite, the multiverse, and the infinite number of universes that are there. And then he reaches this edge, and it's this extremely vivid light, and he goes through that light and he passes through it, and then he meets God or something akin to it. And he is able to understand all of this stuff. It's all there. Everything that he ever wants to know, everything that can be known, it's all there. It's accessible. He doesn't even really have to think about it. He doesn't have to struggle for it. It's all there. He is part of this infinite vastness, and that vastness is also him. And once he has this incredible revelation, then the process reverses and the balloon collapses, and it goes from seeing the multiverse to seeing our universe to seeing our galaxy to seeing our planet to being back in his body in Austin, Texas. And he said he popped awake off the ground as if nothing happened. He said he had a small bump on his head, like a little scratch, and that was it. And he learned that he'd asked for this experience. He realized that before it happened, that he had been asking God to show him the truth, and he was given that opportunity. He said, in fact, just before he was hit by the car, that he heard this voice that came into his head. It was actually a collection of voices speaking as one, and they said, "Do you trust us?" And he said, "Yes." And they said, "Okay." And a moment later, he stepped out into the street and he was hit by the car. It was allowed to happen, but he gave his consent for it. And it was so that he could blow his mind out of his everyday reality and realize that there was this much, much greater potential that he had.
Would
He
you
is
call that a
now a
near-death
psychic.
experience?
Yeah, that's a near-death experience. Now, this is commonly, I don't want to say, it is, if you look at reports of near-death experiences, there are a lot of people that it has variations on the same idea. Some people just experience blankness, just a black void, and that's it. It's like being put under anesthesia or something. But I think it's also
That's the
depends on what the
scariest for
person
me,
is able to
honestly.
experience. All it means is that you need longer to be able to wake up on the other side. That's all that it means. For some people, it takes longer. For people who've lived, like, let's say you were a mafia don and you were responsible for the deaths of dozens or hundreds of people, you know that you were a bad, bad boy, and now you die. Well, you are going to need to be kept in a sort of a state of stasis so that you can be gently brought out of that stasis on the other side and be reborn into your next life, and realize that you chose a role in life, that you were allowed to make the decisions, and some of them were maybe wrong in one sense, but you realize that the life and body is a lot like a dream. And when you wake up on the other side, you're in this larger reality, and you go, okay, I was actually allowed to go into that life and to experience the things that I experienced and to make the decisions that I made. And there is not some kind of eternal damnation waiting for me. Now, I've got some hard lessons to learn from this, and I need to deal with the karma that I accrued from my life in the body. And I'm going to have to come back in another life, and I'm going to have to be the other end of the scale. Instead of the
You know,
mafia, I'm going to be a saint, and I'm
that's
going
very
to help.
fascinating. That's very
Yeah.
Jungian because didn't he also say you can't have happiness without experiencing sadness?
Well, it all comes in well, I don't know if
You
that's,
can't have good without having evil. You
well, he
can't
did say,
define the extreme without
yeah,
the
that's right.
opposite.
That all the opposite extremes, they all come together, and that they are all going to want to come into some kind of balance someday.
If we
It
had all
works.
beige, there wouldn't be it would be so
Yeah,
boring.
Yeah, and he said that there is no light without the dark, and that it's actually better for you to explore the dark sides of yourself rather than the light sides of yourself, because as you reconcile with the dark sides of yourself, the light just naturally shows.
And the other
And
thought I had was, even a black void is a form of consciousness
well,
because
it
it
is.
yeah.
It's just you have to go into a state where you're basic it's almost like being in an induced coma. There are some people who they are not able to make that adjustment when they step over to the other side. There are some people who it's the moment that they are free of their body, they are ready to get on to the next adventure. But those are people who've prepared for that transition from one life to the next. And your psychological state doesn't change that much. Your psychological, you are the same person just without a physical body. So you no longer have the strong emotions of the physical body, and you no longer have the needs for things like air and food and water, but at you're really psychologically, your state really isn't that much different. And I go by not so much my own experience of it, I've had some taste of this, but if you talk to the people at Monroe Institute and other places who have really deeply explored this stuff through meditation and through technology of enhancing the brain to be able to get into altered states of consciousness, people who have talked with others on the other, who have talked with people who are on the other side, with the beings that are beyond human, that are angelic or spiritual, they report that there is this infinite universe that's out there, and that human existence continues, and that after you die, you're basically continuing on in the same psychological state as when you passed. It's just you are being guided to coming back into wholeness and completeness as a person. If you go into death with a lot of heavy duty guilt and bad karma, you're going to have more to deal with on the other side, but you're also going to have more help recovering and restoring yourself. So I think that everyone has an opportunity to do this, that we are living our lives in a way, our lives are like a dream, in the sense of it is something you wake up from eventually, and you realize that the decisions that you made, they will all have to come back into balance again, but you aren't facing some kind of eternal judgment because of what you did while you were a human.
The only thing I know is that my body is a functioning unit of things that make this me possible. I am not everything. I can't touch my liver with my mind. I can't touch my heart with my mind. I can't touch
Yes, you
my
can.
lungs with my mind.
Yes, you
I
can.
just, maybe I can. Maybe I can feel them if I
Your
tried hard
mind and
enough.
body are integrated with each other. In fact, your heart and your gut and other organs have secondary processing centers that help the brain. That's why you feel fear in your gut. That's why you feel love in your chest. It's because there are nerve bundles that are in there that are secondary processing centers. So your brain is the primary processing center, but it's outsourcing some of this. So yes, you can. You can touch your body with your mind. In fact, this is how energy healing works: is you send your mind into your body and you send the good vibes into there, and your body will respond to it. I talk to my body. I lived in a very sort of, like many people who've come to the point in their lives like I have, where we've had to delve a little deeper and explore a little more. We have to go through periods of very rough living, and I did that for many years, and I abused my body in many ways. And now I send my mind into my body and I say, thank you. Thank you, liver. Thank you, liver, for taking all of that alcohol and processing it. And now I'm going to treat you better. Thank you, kidneys, for processing all of those impurities out of me. Thank you, lungs, for inhaling all of that smoke and coming out with it without, something that could permanently harm me. Thank you, back, for taking this burden. I do this because my body responds to it. And you can actually talk to your body. Your body is part of an entire system, and it is not separate from your brain. Your brain is just where your thoughts are, but do your thoughts really originate in your brain, or is your
No,
brain
I
a
think that's my point.
receiver for your
That's exactly my
thoughts?
point, is that
Okay.
I believe that this physicality is interesting. I do think that this existence is interesting, and I don't know what happens after we die. Whatever that is, it's going to happen. I might as
Yeah,
well
and you don't
enjoy the
have to worry.
experience. No, I
And,
don't have
and
to
you,
worry about that. It's going to
if
happen regardless.
you live true, you do the best that you can.
You do the best you can do.
It sounds like you're really devoted to your kids. I mean, that is
Well,
probably the
they're new.
highest calling
They're
a human
two,
can
but
have,
man,
you know?
it's a special experience, you know?
Yeah, and you give everything you can as a parent to your kids, to your wife, to your family, to your neighbors, your community, your friends. Give the best of yourself and live from your heart. Open your heart to people and to experiences and things and everything out there. Then I don't think you really have much to worry about. You don't necessarily have to be some big religious person. You don't have to be Mother Teresa, you know, you don't have to give your life to
The
the
things I
church or
hear about
anything
Mother
like that,
Teresa,
you
she
know?
wasn't really much of a Mother Teresa either. So,
Well, everybody gets kind of attacked afterwards, you
yeah, it's
know.
true.
She's
It's
not
very
around to
true.
defend herself anymore, so
Yeah.
I won't knock on her. Now, I wanted to get
No, that's
into
true.
a Jungian topic with you. You know that
Please.
archetypes are very popular with in that we know that Jung was the sort of the originator of this theory, and I was going to see how much you are into it because as a writer, you know that many of the characters that you create that or have already been created in literature are called archetypal. It means
Hmm.
that they kind of fit a blueprint or a mold and they can wear different disguises or costumes, but they're really all coming back to the same basic idea. You know, there is the leader, there is the soldier or warrior, there is the magician, the intellect, there is the lover, there is the hero, there are other archetypes like the goat, you know, the trickster, the one who takes, like the goat takes the blame, you know. These archetypes are actually originating in something that comes from the collective unconscious, and that you as a writer are often tapping into that collective unconscious and pulling it out and giving it distinct form based off of your own imagination. And the better you understand archetypes, the better writer that you can be, because you can create more depth to your characters, realizing that there is a blueprint behind them. And if you understand that blueprint, then what you're doing is building atop that to create your own unique characters. Now, archetypes are commonly misunderstood because there are different ways of defining it. But if we look at what Jung defined an archetype as, is it's two part. One is that an archetype is sort of a universal blueprint. It is something that you will find in different cultures, times, and places in roughly the same form. But there's another side of it too, is that archetypes originate outside of space time, that they are what David Bohm, the famous physicist, called the implicate order. And he said that everything that becomes into material reality that we know of as material reality, the stars, our bodies, the ground beneath your feet, that is all the explicate order. And what that means is that explicate is based off of something that is there in the implicate order, that is the blueprint for everything that we see in our existence. So that is what Jung, he called it archetypes, because he said that archetypes originate somewhere that is outside of our normal space time, that they appear to be these patterns or blueprints that are imprinted into the very fabric of space time. It's sort of like if you read a book. Okay, now you're sitting there and you're reading to your kid, and you're reading a Dr. Seuss story, let's say. Now,
Hmm.
you take those words and you speak them to your kid. Those words are the implicate order. The explicate order is the world inside of your child's mind that is created based off of your words. They take your words and put it into their imagination. And you're talking about a cat in a hat, and they are in their imagination imagining this cat with a hat on it, you know? Like that is the explicate. And it's kind of the way that archetypes work, is they begin in a place where there is a book that is written and the words are on there, and then the words are spoken, and that goes into our input, into our minds, into our imaginations, and
As an
then we
example,
create
the
them.
Where the Monsters Are, that book, you know what I'm talking
uh,
about?
I haven't
Uh,
read it.
well, there's a book called Where the Monsters, something like that. But anyway, the book does not match what I got told as a child. I have not read that book yet.
It sounds like it's on your to read list.
No, no, I'm saying that the book that my mother read me as a child does not exist.
Oh, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I see what you mean, because you
Yeah.
took it and you put it into your mind and you made it
Yeah.
your own. That's the same
Exactly.
way that
Exactly.
archetypes work. They start off as a rough outline, and then you fill in the details in your own mind and in your own life. Now, if you understand archetypes and the roles that that we live archetypal roles all the time. You as a parent are like a king of your own little kingdom, and along with your wife, you are, you know, king and queen together, you know, and your children are your little princes and princesses, you know. When you go to work and you earn an income and you go out and battle the, you know, in the world, and you battle to get your little piece of the pie, you are now a warrior picking up your sword and putting on your armor and going out there and living this, you know, this existence. When you are putting together the things that you need, the skills and the knowledge, when you put that together to be the person you are, to be able to go out and fight your battles, you know, because your battles are to, you know, get yourself established as a writer and to have a publishing career, or, you know, that, just using that as an example.
Hmm.
Now you are a magician who's weaving together these different forces, and you're pushing these things into motion. They're not tangible, you know, but they're things that are coming out of your mind. When you are, you know, giving your all for your family and for your children, you are a lover in the deepest, most archetypal sense. Now, you can trace that back and look at it and learn from the archetypal lover and the archetypal magician and king and warrior. This all comes from the writing of a guy named Robert Moore, and he wrote a book called King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. They are the four primary archetypes of the self archetype that are all put together into a whole. And the self archetype is where your dreams originate, and it's where the blueprint for you as a whole and complete person, that is where it originates. That's where that blueprint is stored. So if you read Robert Moore's work with Douglas Gillette, they wrote these books together, and the first one is called King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. I'm pretty sure that it is something that Joe Rogan has read, because it is an amazing guide to the masculine psyche, but it's a universal psyche. The ladies out there can understand themselves better also by exploring this work, because the psyche actually has aspects of both genders to it, and you can understand yourself
Yeah,
better
absolutely.
by, you know, you can also, as a man, you can understand yourself better by understanding the archetypes of the feminine psyche. They are the
Hmm.
same as the masculine psyche. It's just that they have different ways of becoming explicate, in other words, of manifesting in this world. They just manifest a little bit differently, but at heart they're really the same as what's in the masculine psyche, and they come together to form into a whole. So I highly suggest this to anyone out there that wants to explore archetypes. When I read that book, especially the first 3 chapter introduction, it blew my mind, and it gave me a real understanding of archetypes like I'd never understood them before. You can find this online. There's a website called The Art of Manliness, and they have taken the work of Robert Moore and in the King, Warrior, Magician, Lover series, and they created a series on their website which actually pulls together all of this, and
Did
they
you say
rewrite it a little bit in modern language. It's called The
did-
Art of Manliness.
manliness? Okay.
Yeah, and they have a really interesting podcast too.
Oh,
Um,
really?
b- yeah, yeah. I
Okay.
was surprised when I ran across their website, and I was like, "Hey, they delve into the work of Robert Moore, and they're explaining life in terms of archetypes and stuff." I want, yeah, okay,
You
these,
are a
these are
cool
some good
guy,
guys.
man.
Yeah,
I am so happy that I got you on to talk to.
me too, man. Thanks for, and you. This has been a great conversation so
It
far. I
really, really
appreciate it.
has. What else we have to talk? I mean, we have a lot. I could talk to you all day, but unfortunately, real
I
life
just heard,
intrudes.
yeah, and I just heard my wife come home, and I know that I've got some things to do here. Do you mind if I tell your listeners where to find me and my work?
I would demand it.
Hey, all right, let's do this. Okay, so if you're interested in dreams, I keep a blog called dreams123.net, and
Great.
it is my main repository for all of my writings about dreams. I've been just keeping, I've had this blog for years, and I've been maintaining it, and hopefully you'll put in your show notes a link to it.
Hmm.
I mentioned earlier that there's a newsletter there that you can sign up for, and you will start getting emails from me right away that will link you to resources. Some of them will be my books, and if you want to buy my books, that's great. But I'm a teacher of this subject, and I've really believe in freely sharing information. So if you want to just access resources that are on my website, you're going to start getting emails that are going to link you to it. I've got videos, I've got podcasts, I've got media interviews that I've done. And of course, I've got my posts and articles that I've put up there. I can teach you about how to remember your dreams, how to interpret your dreams, and then what do you do with that? How do you live your dreams in the very real and practical sense of applying what you learn from your dreams to your daily life? So dreams123.net. I'm also known as Radowl at Reddit, and I am the moderator of the Dreams Forum and also of the Young
It's
Forum.
RADOWL. Just to
Correct.
sound that
Yes.
out.
Yes. And if you type that into a search engine, Radowl will usually get you mostly to my stuff. I have my own little subreddit, radowl.reddit.com. It's anybody can view it, but it's private in the sense of I like to share myself, my information, things that I've done at Reddit, especially people that I've helped with their dreams, and I get really positive feedback from them. And I think that there's something valuable that other people can learn from reading my exchanges with these people who come to Reddit Dreams and they want help with their dreams. This is what I do from anywhere from a few minutes to a few hours a day. I'm there at Reddit and I look for dreams that I can help people with. And I've been doing this for the past 6 years or longer now. I've been a moderator for about the last 5 years, and I really dig this. I'm able to share what I know freely with the public and with people who are enthusiastic about learning more about their dreams. So go to dreams123.net, check that out. Check out my new book, The Dream Interpretation Dictionary, Symbols, Signs, and Meanings. And I'm J.M. Debord, that's Debord. Or just type in Radowl and you'll often find me. There's all those I'm on Facebook and Twitter and all that kind of stuff, which I
I
find to
put
be
all that in
mostly
the
a big
notes.
time
Absolutely.
suck. But I do enjoy Facebook because it's one of the ways that I can reach people that I wouldn't be. There's a whole audience there that I wouldn't be able to reach any other way. And as much as I don't like how Facebook can really suck the time and energy out of you, I'm trying to reach as many people as I can.
I
And
do
what
not
we're
have your
trying to do,
Facebook on here,
interpret
unfortunately.
dreams. Go to facebook.com/interpret dreams. That's my my
Interpret
public
dreams.
Facebook
Okay.
page. Yeah. And that will give you, that'll get you to my page. And I share a lot of resources there and I engage with people when they drop by and stuff like that. So what I'm really trying to do is I'm trying to revive interest in dreams and in Carl Jung. Jung was a pioneer and innovator. He was an amazing person. He gave us a path to deep meaning and significance and even spirituality in our lives without having to go through the church and other spiritual teachings to get there. He tried to show that there is a universal experience of the human being who is seeking meaning and significance. He wrote a book, a very small book. It's called Modern Man in Search of a Soul. And that book resonates with me on so many levels because he's right. And he was writing this book back in the 1940s or 50s. I forget which, but it was way back then. And he's writing this book and telling people that there is a way to finding your soul in the sense of soul meaning deep meaning, significance, interconnection. There's a way we can do this. And we live in this world that's full of fake everything. We are having the bullshit crammed down our throats every day, and we are having this illusion of reality that is being created for us. And now we are having this technology that is allowing us to live in a world that is completely digital and controlled by the techno masters who want to have our minds completely engaged in their digital worlds.
Can
It's
be our
taking
own
us
digital
away
world though
from
too.
it can, and you can use this technology for enhancing yourself for sure. But I think that it is being used mostly to keep people locked into a world that is not real. It's a world of phantasm and illusion. It is keeping us from engaging with each other. How many times have you seen people?
But
How
we're
many times have you
together. It's
seen
so
people
awesome. It's really
at
awesome.
at a restaurant texting to each other from across the table or leaving comments on their Facebook pages and stuff. And I'm going, you're
Yeah.
at a table with each other and you're all staring at your phones. This is
Yeah.
about to get to a new level because they're going to start having these brain implants that will have your thoughts that are interfaced with your technology, which means that the technology that can then influence your thoughts and create a completely digital existence for you. And that's going
But
to
you
be
know what,
scary
Jason? I have
because
faith, man. I really do, because
I
I
do
am
too.
talking to you for the last hour and 42 minutes, and there are people like us out there that want to connect and talk awesome stuff.
That's right. And we can use this technology to enhance ourselves in our lives. It's just, we have to be very careful. And my point is that we are in a world full of fake everything,
Hmm.
fake news and fake people and fake social profiles and all this stuff. And dreams and the teachings of Carl Jung are going the other direction towards authenticity and truth. And if you explore this for yourself, it is the antidote for the fake world. So then you can engage with this world, but you are more discerning and you can keep your feet firmly planted inside of the core of your own existence. So
It's
I
beautiful stuff.
highly encourage your listeners, check out Carl Jung, check out my writings, and it will be, it'll help you
It'll
to,
help.
yeah, it'll help. Exactly.
Anything else for us?
Hey man, I appreciate you having me on and giving me a chance to put this out there into the world. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you joining me, man. It was
I
really
hope people have
fantastic.
enjoyed
Thank you
it.
so
Yeah.
much.
Great conversation, great questions. You're a great host, Brian. I really appreciate it. And
You've been a great guest. I really appreciate it as well. And
thank you, my
hopefully
sir.
we could do it again soon. I really enjoyed it. And thank you so
I'd be
much.
happy to. Be happy to.
Great.
Okay. You take care.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And that was J.M. Debord. I really enjoyed that conversation. I had to work a little bit to get him scheduled. It was worth it, though. Man, I had a great time. I really enjoyed that conversation. Again, check out the show notes. There's a great deal of treasure mixed up in there. Next show is Kevin Winglas. This guy had some really great ideas for the future of creativity. BrianYellow.com. Follow me at Twitter at BRYAIELLO. Until next time, have a great day. Bye-bye.